becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish between reality and fiction. Politics, in particular, seems to have taken a surreal turn. In the USA, you have a president who recently claimed that there are 54 states, had addressed a dead politician at a White House conference, and at one public event managed to mix up his wife and his sister, which is not just grounds for divorce, but possibly a criminal inquiry. The UK hardly fares any better, with a government that appears to be trying to set a new world record for the number of prime ministers and chancellors it can get through in 1 year. When Joe Biden recently referred to the new UK Prime Minister as Rashid Sunak, maybe he wasn't mistaken after all. Maybe this was just a premonition of someone we haven't seen yet. But even though the world of politics has become self-satirising, that's nothing compared to the world of identity politics. This week on Norwegian television, on a show called Good Morning Norway, there was a sympathetic interview with a 53-year-old able-bodied man who identifies as a handicapped woman. Despite having no physical disability, he uses a wheelchair most of the time. Is this a ruse? A way to get access to the more spacious public toilet facilities? It seems not, because this man says he's always wished that he was born a woman who was paralysed from the waist down. And that's his truth, or her truth, or whatever it is we're meant to say. So now it seems that we can be trans-disabled and find ourselves a platform on TV to have our delusions validated. This, of course, is reminiscent of Rachel Dolezal. You remember Rachel Dolezal, artist and civil rights activist, who was formerly president of the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People. There was just one problem.
Is that your dad?
Yeah, that's my dad.
This man right here is your father? Right there?
You have a question about that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I was wondering if your dad really is an African-American man.
That's a very... I mean, I don't know what you're implying.
Are you African-American?
I don't understand the question of... I did tell you that, yes, that's my dad. And he was unable to come in January.
Are your parents, are they white?
Yes, it turned out that this trailblazing African-American activist was, in fact, white. Dolezal was rightly criticised for this, even though it does seem that this could be a genuine feeling that she has, some kind of psychological condition. And yet, identity politics has reached such heights of absurd contradictions that Dolezal is considered a monstrous fraud, and yet an able-bodied Norwegian man is celebrated for calling himself disabled. A while ago, the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins posed a question on Twitter about the inconsistencies of identity politics. He said, in 2015, Rachel Dolezal, a white chapter president of NAACP, was vilified for identifying as black. Some men choose to identify as women, and some women choose to identify as men. You will be vilified if you deny that they are literally what they identify as. Discuss. As he pointed out, Dawkins wasn't attempting to disparage trans people. He was just trying to initiate a conversation about what the rules are here, because it can be quite confusing. But by tweeting this, by simply posing a question, Dawkins had committed an act of heresy. He was rebuked by the American Humanist Association and had his Humanist of the Year award formally rescinded. But aren't scientists supposed to ask questions? Isn't that something we're all allowed to do? Because, let's be honest, we all seem to instinctively know when not to take someone's identity seriously. For instance, there was the case of Stephanie Walsh, the 46-year-old man who, after 23 years of marriage, suddenly realised he was actually a 6-year-old girl and left his wife to live with some new adoptive parents. Now, look, I didn't realise that it worked that way. You know, when I was a child and I was trying to sneak into horror films at the cinema, it would have been really easy if I knew that I could just identify as 18. Well, these, of course, are all just extreme examples, you might say, and yes, I would agree with that. But the extremes of identity politics are rapidly becoming the norm. Last week, TikTok star Dylan Mulvaney had a public televised meeting with the President of the United States. And why? Because Dylan identifies as a girl. Take a look at this.
Day 66, being a girl, and today I'm in nature. Trees, I love them. Water, lakes, I love them. Heels, they're my hiking heels. I love them. Okay, come on. Bridges, love them. Coconut water, love it. Not nad, just love it. Wind turbine, love it. Meadows, love them. you, Lucy. Oh, I'm scared of getting Lyme disease. Love ya. Ah! Oh. Did you see that? I gotta get out of here. Did you see that?
There's a dragonfly.
Oh my God.
Now, it seems pretty clear to me that that's probably a hoax, because that kind of ditzy, prancing, scatterbrained depiction of girlhood is too obviously based on misogynistic stereotypes to be real, isn't it? I mean, I can't be sure. Does he believe it? Is he pranking us? If so, this is expert-level trolling. And was the Instagram influencer, Ollie London, being sincere when he claimed to be trans-Korean, even though he was white? I mean, he had surgery to look Korean, and in doing so sparked accusations of indulging in racist stereotypes. And then what about the woodwork teacher in Canada who wears huge prosthetic breasts to school? Now, many people have pointed out that this looks very much like fetish gear, but the school defended him, saying this was her gender identity and must be validated. And this is the point. The culture wars have reached the point where we just don't know what is truth and what is fiction anymore. And this is what happens when identity becomes solely a matter of individual truths, which don't exist, by the way. Truth isn't subjective. And of course, there are people who struggle with their body, who feel they have to present as the opposite sex or even undertake painful and expensive surgery in order to have a chance at a happy life. And we've always been sympathetic and accommodating to such people. But with various governments around the world now changing their laws so that anyone can self-identify as whatever sex they like and gain access to women's-only spaces, people are pointing out that this creates a loophole that is clearly open to exploitation. No one is saying that trans people are predators. They are saying that predators are predators and will use any means available to gain access to victims. It's already happened. Convicted sex offender Karen White, a male who identified as female, was transferred to New Hall Prison in West Yorkshire and went on to sexually assault 2 female inmates. And this is not an isolated incident, far from it. So it isn't transphobia to point out that identity politics in its current form has some serious consequences. I keep hearing that right-wing comedians only have one joke, and that's something to do with identifying as an attack helicopter. Actually, that's a 7-year-old online meme, and I've never heard any right-wing comedian use it as a punchline, but I understand why people pretend that they do. It's always much easier to attack a straw man. But is that joke all that far from the reality? If activists are going to claim that identity is all about the choices one makes for oneself, and that these should be implemented in law, then surely they have to include the trans Koreans, the trans disabled, and the teacher with the immense prosthetic breasts. And this means we all have to live in a world in which we're constantly questioning our own judgments, where the lines of reality and satire are so blurred that we can never be sure where we stand. Now, that doesn't sound sensible to me. So rather than embrace the chaos of extreme identity politics, let's fight instead for the primacy of truth. Let's restore reason and objectivity and evidence-based analysis. Because you can't have a coherent society when the rules are being set by the fantasists.